Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Adams from ProWritingAid. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are joined by Jennie Nash. She is the founder and CEO of Author Accelerator. Her book coach certification program has trained more than 75 book coaches to support writers through the entire creative process and to run successful, sustainable businesses. She continues to work as a book coach herself, running a multiple six-figure coaching practice. Her nonfiction and fiction clients have landed top New York agents and six-figure book deals with Big Five houses such as Penguin, Scribner, Simon & Schuster, and Hachette. Jennie is the author of 10 books in 3 genres, including her most recent Blueprint for a Book, Build a Novel from the Inside Out. Jennie, thank you so much for being here. If you're ready, I'm going to disappear and learn along with everyone else, and then I will pop back in to help with Q&A at the end. So everyone, if you have specific questions for Jennie, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to as many as we can. And you'll also be able to find Jennie's slides from this presentation on the Romance Week Hub after the session today.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to ProWritingAid for having me here. And it's just awesome to be here on day one. This is a week of amazing programming. There's so much to learn. And I have a lot to share, so I'm going to get started. And I am going to go really fast. So make sure to get those slides from the hub later. And also there's some downloads that'll help with what I'm talking about as well. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share my slides and I'm going to get right into it. All right, so what we're talking today about is a tool called the Inside Outline. And that is something that I have developed in my work at Author Accelerator, training coaches to help writers. We come up with tools and frameworks that help people all the way through the creative process, and they're very powerful and tested, and this is one of our all-time favorites. I have written 10 books in 3 genres, as the intro alluded to, and my most recent is Blueprint for a Book, which is a framework for how to write a novel in 14 steps. And the Inside Outline is at the heart of it. That's what we're going to be talking about today. The Inside Outline is a tool that really works for all kinds of different people. This is my client and friend, KJ Dell'Antonia, talking about the Inside Outline. Her first novel, The Chicken Sisters, was an instant New York Times bestseller and a Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick. And KJ is a super fan of the Inside Outline. I've since worked with her on 3 Inside Outlines for 3 different novels. So she is a huge fan. And Allison Hammer, who has 3 books out now, actually, is also a big fan. And you can see here that what she's saying is that it just really helps her be more efficient writer, which is what we're all about. You can certainly write a novel and take a ton of time, but what I want you to do is have an easier time of it, a more efficient time of it. And the Inside Outline is not necessarily an easy tool. It takes the hardest work of writing a novel and compresses it into a really short space so that you get the really hard stuff done first, and then the rest of the novel writing is easier. It's not like it's a silver bullet that makes, you can snap your fingers and write a great novel. Nothing works like that. So today what I'm going to talk about a bit is the nature of the novel itself, the problem with the binary way of looking at this pantsing plotting divide, how we need to bring both of those sides together, which is what the Inside Outline is about. The Inside Outline has rules. I'm very strict about them. You'll see those. And there's 10 questions that you can apply to the Inside Outline, and you can use this checklist with a critique partner, an editor, a friend, a book coach, whomever is helping you do your work. And then I'm really excited to share a case study that one of Author Accelerator book coaches worked on with the writer, Jeannie Lee Rose. So we'll get to that. And then I will have time at the end to answer your questions. And if I don't get to your questions today, I'm going to be in the Romance Writers Week Facebook group answering questions later today and even throughout this week. So you can go there and ask questions as well. Okay, so the nature of the novel. Let's just talk for a minute about that, because We sometimes forget that writing a novel is an incredibly complex, multi-layered, multivariable, irreducible thing that you're making that's trying to capture the human condition. It's a really complex thing that we're doing, and we sometimes forget that, especially because the experience of reading a novel is so easy. You know, you sit down and you start at the beginning and you go to the end and you fall into it, and it feels like writing one should be that way, and it's just not true. A novelist has to design a structure to contain a massive amount of information while at the exact same time trying to spin a tale that delights and engages the reader. So these very complex things are all happening at the same time. And the two most typical reactions to that reality are to ignore the burden of structure and focus exclusively on the emotion of the story. And we often refer to people that write like that as pantsters, or we say that they're winging it, or they just sit down and write. And the other reaction to the reality of how hard it is to write a novel is to ignore the emotional part and focus exclusively on the structural side. And we often call those people plotters. So there are inefficiencies with both of these extremes. And I actually don't like the binary way of looking at the situation, because everybody, when they're writing a novel, has to do both pieces of that puzzle. You can't just do one or the other. And really what's happening for people who say, oh, I'm a plotter, or I'm a pantser, I only do this or I only do that, is that they're doing this work. They're just doing it subconsciously, unintentionally, and probably inefficiently. We need to have both sides, the fire and the algebra side of the equation. So why do we need that? The problem with pantsing or winging it is that pantsers love that free flowing, generative, sit down and let it flow kind of an imaginative work of writing a novel, which is really fun. It's really fun stuff to do for sure. But when you allow yourself to only work on that side of the equation, you're ignoring the entire other side, the algebra, the structure, the logic, that whole analytic aspect of writing a novel. And it is very logical and analytical work. And if you're just kind of winging it, you're hoping that those elements are magically going to appear while you write, and they won't. Ignoring that side is very risky. And these are the manuscripts that we tend to see that are flat and they don't hold together. The middle sags, the ending doesn't pay off. They just don't sing the way that you want them to sing. And working in that way demands that you're performing these two different functions at the same time. This is a quote from Rachel Aaron, whose book 2000 to 10,000 is one I highly recommend. Rachel is a writer, and 2000 to 10,000 is her exploration of how she could write more words in one sitting. Those numbers refer to the words she would write in one sitting. And what she found in analyzing her own habits and processes is that she was doing this hard work of writing, which is figuring out what needs to happen to move the story forward in the most dramatic and exciting fashion. She was doing that in the most time consuming way, which is in the middle of the writing itself. And that's the inefficiencies that you introduce if you only focus on that emotional side. It's very inefficient, it's time consuming, it's frustrating, and it exposes the writer to so much doubt, which is crushing. We have enough doubt to begin with. We don't need to be introducing doubt into our writing process. But the problem with the other side, for people who are just camped out on the other side and on the plot side, is that those types of writers love that algebra side, that very logical side of the equation. And they love those massive story grids, which plot out every last little thing and really look at just plot, plot, plot. And they somehow think that if they do that, they're not going to have to do that emotion work, that if they have a plot that's so good and so watertight, that they're not going to have to go on to the other side. But it doesn't happen like that. Ignoring that fire or passion side is also very risky. Those plot heavy grids often miss the real story and the real meaning and what's really going on. And they're often not books that touch the reader's heart and soul, which is the whole reason that readers come. So we don't want that. We don't want you writing a novel that has an amazing sounding plot and all kinds of cool twists and turns, but doesn't really touch the reader. That's no good. That's not what we want, because what happens is the plot's kind of tripping along and moving along like a current, and the real story underneath it, everything that's happening, is just not there when people are focusing only on plot. So what we need is a way to combine the power of both sides of these equations, the fire and the algebra. We need a way to bring them together, and we need it to be simple enough that writers are going to actually do it. Because understanding something or thinking a tool is cool, or taking a course or learning a new way of doing something is all well and good, but it's not going to help you unless you actually do the thing. So the inside outline was designed to bring both of these parts of the equation together. And it was designed to allow you to do it the way an architect might build a model of a house, where you're making a little model of your novel so that you can pick it up and lift it and look at it in 360-degree format and really see how it functions in time and space. And all artists do this kind of work, this kind of formulating work. You might think of a sculptor making a clay model before they cast it in bronze, or a seamstress making a dress out of muslin before making it out of a beautiful silk. We have this picture here of an architect making a model, and that's exactly what the inside outline is getting the writer to do, is to make a model that is small enough that we can manipulate it and see it and work on it and use it before we write an entire draft of a book that doesn't go anywhere. So the inside outline has two tiers to it: the plot and the point. The plot is the outside. It's what we see. It's what happens. It's what the story looks like to the reader. And the point is the inside, or the internal story, that emotion that's running underneath it, the thing that we really are reading for. And the inside outline marries the plot and the point together at every single turn. So in every single scene, we want to know what happens in the scene, and we want to know why it matters to the protagonist, what meaning they are making of that scene, what emotion they are bringing to it, why it means anything to them. And if we pair the plot and the point at every turn, we are going to ensure that every scene in the novel is doing what it needs to do. It's carrying its weight. We're going to ensure that there's narrative drive, and we're going to tie those things together with the because of that clause. And the because of that clause is the glue that holds it all together. So when you finish your inside outline, it's going to look like this. And this is blurry. There's nothing wrong with your eyes. I've intentionally blurred this out just so you can see the shape of it and the way that it looks. It's only 3 pages long, and it's words, it's narrative. It's not a grid. It's not super complex. It's just a very simple, streamlined version of your novel. The green and the red and the yellow are elements here. This is a writer working on a revision, and the stoplight method with those 3 colors is a type of process that I teach for revision. You can absolutely use the inside outline when you're revising, but what I'm talking about today is using it to start a novel. And this is what it's going to look like. So the example that I'm going to give here is from KJ's book, The Chicken Sisters. I just pulled this a couple days ago and saw the number of ratings she has, and that it's an editor's pick and is obviously doing exceptionally well out there in the world. And I put KJ's Instagram on here. The writers who allow us to use their work as examples are really giving us such a great gift, and you can give them a gift in return by, excuse me, by following them and saying that you heard about them and that you enjoyed learning from them. That is a really great way to thank people. So you can go check KJ out over there on Instagram to thank her. So this is the book jacket copy for the Chicken Sisters, and I'm not going to take the time to read through the whole thing. When you get my slides later, when you get the recording and in the Romance Week Hub, you can grab this and read it and look at it more carefully. But just to give us a quick sense of what's happening here is that there is two restaurants that are vying against each other in a TV reality show, and there's different members of the family on each of these sides. And one of those sisters is May, and Amanda is her sister. Those are the characters that we are dealing with. Oh, wow. I have made a mistake, you guys. I have the wrong book that I'm showing you an example for. I totally goofed on that. So I'm gonna fix that later and give you a way to fix it later. But what we're actually looking at is KJ's second novel. I just goofed. Her second novel, Scratch the Chicken Sisters, is about these characters. Rhett, who is writing a book, and she has a pen name of Maggie, and Jazz is her best friend. So this is KJ's second novel. It's forthcoming and it's called In Her Boots. And we can get that book jacket copy for that book later. So you can dig into that and read that. But for now, these are the characters that we're just going to look at while we see an example of the inside outline. You can tell that this is all live because I made a mistake. Okay, so the plot point and the first point of the inside outline here is that Rhett is invited to appear on the Today Show to offer advice to graduates. That's because she's written this book with a pen name, and she plans to refuse. But after a tax bill comes informing her she owes a bunch of money on a farm she hasn't yet claimed, her best friend Jazz persuades her that she should go on the Today Show because it's going to sell books so that Rhett can make money. So the point of this scene, this is the opening scene of the new novel, is that Rhett doesn't believe she has anything to offer others. She wrote this book under a pseudonym and doesn't want to be known as the author. So that's the reason that scene is there. That's what's going on with Rhett. That's the point that's underneath that whole scene. Then we get because of that. So because Rhett agrees to go on the Today Show, the next point or the next scene, the next plot point is that Rhett gets all dressed up and feeling like a fraud. She goes to the studio and hears her mother's voice in the green room, and she freaks out. She can't go on TV in front of her mother with her mother. She just can't do it because she would be revealing herself as the author of this book. She would be revealing so much about herself. So she pushes her best friend on instead to pretend to be her. So now there's all kinds of layers of mistaken identity because the best friend is pretending to be the writer who's actually the pen name for Rhett. So Jazz, right before she goes on, says, "I haven't even read your book." And Rhett gives her a quick primer on what Maggie in the book is all about. So you can tell this is kind of a setup for disaster, which is great. We love that at the start of a book. So the point of that scene is that Rhett still isn't her own person when she's with others. She's too worried about what they think, especially her mother. So again, the point is just letting the author know, why is this scene here? Why have I put it here? What is it accomplishing? What is going on with this character? Why does the character care? And what meaning are they making of it? So that's kind of the way that it's going to look, as the plot point pairings are going to be glued by that because of that middle. So the because of that is the engine of the whole thing. And when I say that you want to see narrative drive, you want to see the plot driving to the plot and the point driving to the point. That's how we're really going to get a novel that sings and that moves along at a great pace. And the point is almost always the because of that engine, the point driving from thing to thing to thing. It's not the plot. And that's why the inside outline is so different. Instead of a plot grid that's like, well, this happened and then this other cool thing happened and then this thing happened, we're looking at that emotional underpinning and how the emotions drive forward. Because she felt this certain way, this next thing happened. Because she felt this other thing, the next thing happened. And the rules of the inside outline are that you want no more than 3 pages single spaced and no more than 3 lines per bullet point. And each scene must cause the next. That's the because of that clause. And then you're going to test everything with the 10 questions. So the reason that I have these rules and that I'm very strict with them is that when people start doing this, they either say, well, I can't possibly get my whole story into 3 pages. It's never going to work. Or they say, I'm going to do every last little tiny detail and have this giant long grid. And that defeats the purpose, because the purpose of this is to have a tiny little thing that we can hold in our hands. It's like a smallest representation of our whole story that we can look at and see and analyze before we blow it out and write a whole lot more, because we can solve all the problems on these 3 pages. That's what's incredible, is if we do it right, we can solve the problems. And so the rules are here to help you solve those problems. And if you cheat, you're just cheating yourself. So some of the most frequently asked questions, or the most frequently asked questions, is, do I put in every scene? How on earth am I going to get my whole book into 3 pages? How do I do that? And what you really want to do is not think in terms of scene breakdown. You want to think in terms of major events in the story, in the novel. And so those are the things you want to put down. So this is a example of a story graph from Kurt Vonnegut, which you can see on YouTube. If you look up Kurt Vonnegut story grid, you'll see a video of him sketching out these kinds of archetypal shapes of stories. And Cinderella is a common one and an obvious one. And the highs and lows of the story that you see plotted out here are what we're trying to capture in the inside outline. So this chunk in the middle, when Cinderella meets the prince, for example, could be an event that you put on your inside outline. There's other scenes that happen within that. You know, she walks in, she sees him across the room, they dance. Depending on what version of Cinderella you're watching, you know, they run out in the garden. So there's a lot of things that happen, but we just want the major event. That's what we're looking for, so that we can make sure that this reduced version of the book is really holding together. So the 10 questions, I'm going to whip through these really fast so you get a sense of what the inside outline can show you and can teach you. And these 10 questions will also be available in the Romance Week Hub. And we will also send them out with a recording. So you don't have to scribble these down. You will get them. And they're obviously here on the slides too. Okay, so thing one is you want to check your inside outline to be sure there's one clear point. Is this story about something? And you want to make sure that your POVs are consistent and clear throughout. In many romance books, we have 2 POVs where there's a he said, she said, or she said, or whatever it might be, the back and forth of 2 characters. And we want to make sure that those POVs are really consistent and clear. We want to check for an arc of change. That's what a novel is about, is we come to watch people change, and we come to watch them change emotionally, which is why the inside outline is so powerful. We don't come to watch them move through an arc of change that the plot is driving. We come to watch the one that the emotions are driving. And we want to see the ending of the book resolve whatever problem was presented at the beginning of the book. That's what we're here for. You want to check the cause and effect trajectory of this entire novel. Do the actions of the protagonist drive to the next thing? Do they cause the next thing in everything that you've got down in every chapter? So this is that because of that glue that we're talking about. These are the things that propel a novel and make sure that it has narrative drive. You want to make sure that the force of opposition is clear. Is it clear what is standing in the protagonist's way on the inside and the outside? This, again, is what the inside outline is here to do. It's designed to do, is that there are things in the world, plot level outside forces, that are keeping your character from getting what she wants. And there are things on the inside that are keeping her from getting what she wants, the emotional truths of her life, the things she believes about herself, the doubts that she has. And when both of those things are clear and strong, it's going to be really satisfying to watch that character overcome those things. You want to check to see that the character's motivation and logic are clear. In other words, do the protagonist's actions actually make sense? Would they really behave this way that you have them behaving? Or are they behaving this way because you want them to behave that way? We don't want that. We want there to be internal logic to how they're behaving. Number 7 is you want to check to make sure your protagonist has agency over their decisions. That means they're making decisions, that they have control of those decisions. They are in charge of the things that are happening to them. They're making their own choices. Now, maybe their choices are to not go on this date or to not let this guy capture their heart or whatever their decision is. It doesn't always have to be a positive movement. It can be a negative movement in the story, but they need to be choosing. It can't always be that external things are forcing them to make choices, and it can't always be that plot level things are forcing them to make choices. A few of those are okay in a story, but we want to see the protagonist having agency over their decisions. We also want to make sure that those decisions have consequences. In other words, is something at stake in every single scene, in every single event on your inside outline. You want to see that the consequences are there. Then you want to make sure that the pacing and flow of the story is strong, that there's tension throughout, that there's rising and falling, like we saw in that Cinderella plot. And you can see that on the inside outline. That's what's crazy is you can see all these things on the inside outline and you can solve them all on the inside outline. And it's way easier than solving them on an entire manuscript. So if you do the inside outline correctly and you apply these elements, this checklist to it, you will be able to solve for all these problems before you start to write. The final one is genre conventions. Does the story do what the genre needs it to do? In romance, there are specific tropes and subcategories that people are going to expect, that your reader is going to want. That's often why readers come to certain romance novels, is they like those conventions. They want to see them. They, whatever those tropes that you're working with might be, it doesn't matter. You just have to make sure that you're clear on them and that your story is doing what that genre needs it to do. So those are the 10 questions that we put to the inside outline. So one other question that often comes up at this stage is, can I use the inside outline if I've already started to write or when I'm finished with a draft? And the answer is absolutely, because the revision cycle means that you assess and evaluate the work, then you solve the problem. You figure out what you're going to do to solve the problem. Then you execute that fix. And you do that on a macro level before you do it on a micro level. Then usually you go out and get feedback from beta readers or an editor or book coach, and then you come back and do the same process again. And the inside outline can work extremely well to assess and evaluate. That's what the 10 question checklist is for. It can work extremely well at the problem solving stage when you're trying to figure out how to fix this problem that you've introduced into your book. It can contain that solution. And then when you execute the fix, it can help because the inside outline can carry the information. Let's say you're working on chapter 10 and you realize something has to change in chapter 1. You can go back to your inside outline and put it on there and change it on the inside outline so that now your inside outline reflects your entire manuscript, and you do that process over and over and over again. So the inside outline can actually work as a roadmap for a new book, as a container for ongoing changes while you write. It can help you solve character, chapter, and world building problems when you get stuck. You can do an inside outline for a particular chapter. You can do it for a character. You can do it for world building elements. I've had writers do inside outlines for a secret. Where does the secret happen in the plot, and who knows about it, and why is it there? I've had people do inside outlines for technology that runs throughout a book. If you're working on a romance that's a sci-fi or fantasy type of thing, maybe there's some sort of supernatural element or otherworldly element, and you can really use an inside outline to work on that. It can guide your revision, as we just saw, and it's a really excellent way to write a great synopsis at the end of the process when you're going to pitch. So it's kind of a really powerful, flexible little tool. And you will see in a minute that the Insight Outline works really well with other kinds of writing structural tools. You can overlay things on top of it. If you like other kinds of writing tools or systems or processes, you can overlay them on the Insight Outline. It plays really well with others. So I want to turn now to a case study to show you more exactly what an Insight Outline looks like and how it works. And this is a novel coming out in 2022 from Jennie Lee Rose, and it's called Perfectly Inevitable. And we're going to get to see the progression of the Insight Outline for this novel. The cover, here's a cover of this book. And like I said, it's coming in spring of 22. It's a first novel by Jennie Lee Rose. And as I mentioned before, Jennie has just been exceptionally generous in letting me share her inside outlines with you. And she's just doing that out of the generosity of her heart. So please go find her on Instagram. She's at Jennie Lee Rose on Instagram, or follow her newsletter on her website, which is here, as a way to thank her and just let her know that you were here today and heard about it. And if you learned something from it, that would be a really great way to thank her. And her book coach, author, accelerator, certified coach, Savannah Gilbo, also is letting us share her work. And Savannah is an expert in romance novels as well as other kinds of genres as well. She works in YA, she works in horror, she works in other fiction genres, but her specialty is in romance novels. And she worked with Jennie and is sharing her work today as well. And when I mentioned before that you can overlay other processes onto the inside outline, author accelerator coaches are trained to bring their own genius to the frameworks that we teach them. And Savannah is also certified in the story grid method, and she uses those two processes together. She often overlays the story grid method with the inside outline and brings her own special genius to it as well. So that's what I mean by the inside outline plays well with others. So I just want to really give a shout out and thank both Jennie Lee Rose and Savannah Gilbo for letting us use their work so that we can learn and see how this all goes. So please go follow them to thank them and let them know. So the book that we're looking at is a friends to lovers second chances trope. And the best friends here are destined for more. They've been separated by an impossible decision back in the day. And after a decade of trying to forget, they're wondering if it's too late to open their hearts to love again. So that's the basic setup that we're looking at. And the characters that we're going to be following are Laurel, the protagonist, who is a contractor who's just started a home renovation business that's in danger of crumbling. And Max, her former best friend, divorced and back in his, there's another mistake, hometown. He's not back in his homework. He's back in his hometown to start over again. He's opened a craft brewery with a second floor in need of renovation. So that's what we've got. And I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen here because I'm going to share in a different way. So let me come back in here. And now I'm going to share my entire screen so that we can look out at Google together. So let me minimize that and let me move that down so we don't have to look at that together. Hopefully that will go behind over there. All right, so here is what we got. I'm gonna really minimize that and put it down there. Okay, so what I'm gonna be showing you are the different iterations. I gotta, sorry, move this one down so that's not in the way. Oh, maybe it's not gonna work. Okay, the different iterations of the inside outline. So This is this is the book jacket copy actually, that was done after the fact of the inside outline. And it's what we just talked about, that we know that Laurel has this dream of launching her own business, and she's not in good shape right now, and she needs one big client to save her. And we know that Max is back in his hometown, and he's trying to reclaim his life. So what happened between them back in the day is he hurt Laurel, breaking her heart in the worst way, and then disappearing. And he is back in town trying to reconnect with old friends, but he's not sure he's going to be able to do that with her. And they're brought together by the plot that Max has this brewery, and it has an upstairs apartment that needs renovating, and Laurel is going to do that. So that's what we're looking. And here is the first iteration of Jeannie Lee Rose's inside outline. And it's going to be hard for us to look at this in a great deal of detail, but what I want you to see right here is how it looks, that she's got chapter point all the way. So I said no more than 3 pages. This goes a tiny bit over into page 4. Now, the reason that I have that 3-page limit is because if I had a 4-page limit, you'd go over into 5 pages. If I had a 5-page limit, you'd go over 6 pages. So it's fine to sneak over into 4 pages, but we're really shooting for 3. This is a perfect length inside outline, and she goes all the way to the epilogue. Something else I want to point out here is this is just one POV. So she's skipping chapters because this is only Laurel's POV. So when you have a 2 POV romance novel and you're doing the inside outline, I suggest doing one version for each POV character and then putting them together. You want to make sure that the story totally works from her point of view before you bring in another point of view character. So this is a really smart way of using the inside outline. All writing tools are just tools that we use to help us write better stories. And however you want to use it is up to you. This is just a really smart way to do the POVs in 2 separate pieces and then bring them together. So you can see that for every scene, in this case, chapter, you can have a scene, you can have events. As I mentioned before, we have a point. So it's scene, point, all the way through. And if we were to dig into these, we would see that the because of that is inherent in that. You don't necessarily have to write it out. So what I want to show, though, is this next version, which is Savannah, the book coach, coming in, and look at how many comments that she's able to make on this inside outline. I'm going to go back slowly and look at some of them in detail. So I know this is kind of dizzying to look at. I just want you to look at how much she's able to see in here. I mean, it just is like some really rich questions and conversations started because Jeannie did such an amazing job putting this together, and she followed the rules and she did everything right. So the kind of thing that Savannah is looking at, she identifies that the decisions at the scene level are not really there. And that forward momentum or narrative drive that we were talking about is not really here. And Savannah could see that. So right from the start, she's saying, we need to see this character make a decision. We need to see some kind of consequence. We need to see something happen more directly here to kick the story off. And other questions are, I mean, sometimes the comments are, that this is good, this is going well. We can see what's happening there, but you can see that another decision is missing here. And Savannah's identifying a problem throughout the inside outline, that this character doesn't have agency, that she's not making those decisions, that the consequences are not clear. It's what that means is that there's too much plot and not enough point. What is she thinking? What is she really doing? How is she taking control of her life or of the situation? We can also see that what she is doing well, that Savannah rightly says that Jeannie's doing a good job with the internal points of each scene. She's trying really hard. You can see in this one, what is the point of this scene? Laurel is confused and indignant. Max had no right to kiss her after the pain he'd caused her, but losing the Livingston project to her rival and watching the Miller's house burn to the ground is devastating. Somebody really wants to ruin her. So here she's talking about what happened to she and Max back in the day. So she's using those internal points really, really well. And Savannah is still driving into that decision about what decision is happening. And she said, if she's making the decision to take Max's project or not, too many times, it will feel redundant to the reader. So you can see if Jeannie had written this entire novel in this way, this is where it would have fallen apart. It would have fallen flat. The reader would have been like, well, nothing's happening here. There's no forward momentum. There's no movement. There's no drive. And what we're doing is saving that from happening. So the inside outline is a place where you can identify all those things, and you can see the kinds of comments that Savannah is making. And same thing, that decisions are tied to stakes. So here Savannah is asking, okay, so will this decision to kiss him or not kiss him? If so, are those stakes clear enough as it's been written? Meaning, what does she stand to lose or gain if she kisses him? What does she stand to lose or gain if she doesn't? So every single plot point, every single chapter, every single scene, every single event, we're asking these questions about why is it here? What is going on emotionally for this character? What is happening in that plot that is driving this story forward? Because the real story is happening at the level of the point. So this is a point about the rising stakes and the decisions getting tougher and harder as you go. You can see all that in an inside outline. So there are many, many comments on here, and we start to see that there's a secret in this inside outline. And Savannah is asking really good questions here about what clues to that secret are being planted so that the reader is in on it and the reader is, knowing kind of what's happening as it goes. That is a really important thing with anything that's got a secret or a mystery or something in it. And we can see that, and we can track that on the inside outline. So interestingly, there is a character in this story that is introduces a kind of thriller element to it. And Savannah really identified that. And you can see her really reacting to that and identified that if this was going to be a true romance, which is what Jeannie really wanted, she shared with me her reasons for wanting to write romance, and they're so beautiful. It's that this author had a hard childhood and found a lot of solace and escape in romance and wanted to do that her own self for other people, wanted to make that her own self for readers to experience, and wanted other women who were feeling lonely or like they were not being loved the way they wanted to be loved to feel that, to really feel the emotion of it. That's why she wanted to write romance. And she actually, Jeannie, has her whole life wanted to do this. And it's only now she's been married, she's raised children, she's been divorced, she's remarried now, she's a grandmother, and she's retired and has room now in her life to do this work. And that's why it is so meaningful to her and so important to her. And she wanted to write in the romance genre. So Savannah was calling her out saying, you're starting to kind of sneak into thriller territory, and we're not sure that we want to do that. So it goes like this all the way to the end, with Savannah really digging in and asking her some excellent questions. And the big thing about wanting that payoff for the reader, the happily ever after at the end, that some things need to really be resolved in order to feel that. So Savannah says, since it's a romance, you may want to include more scenes of Laurel and Max together, working on projects together, etc. So you can see that in this tiny little, more than 3 pages inside outline, Savannah's able to identify so many issues and problems with this book that can be solved right now. And what happened was, working with Savannah, Jeannie went on to solve those problems. So this is now a version where you can see everything on here with both POVs woven together. And they have done that all the way throughout. Now, this one is way more than 3 pages, because what happens is, once you get it right, you can blow it out. This one is 15 pages. I didn't need to scroll down all the way in to show that, but I sort of wanted you just to see. It's very detailed. It's very long. They've got a happily ever after, 1 year later epilogue. The issue of Connie and the sabotage that she brought to the story is resolved here at the end. And but it is absolutely not a thriller. We absolutely know that it is a romance, and you can see that some chapters have multiple scenes. So the writer here has expanded the inside outline out, and you can also see that the scene and point is no longer called out specifically. It's inherent in these descriptions. So we went from this, the very original 3-page inside outline to a bunch of questions. Then there were back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to solve those questions. Then we land on a longer version that incorporates everything. And look what they did at the very end. This is amazing. This is what I was talking about, where Savannah, as a book coach, has a special expertise in story grid as well. And they overlaid those elements onto the inside outline, and it's all here now. So you've got the both POVs, you've got the scene and the point, you've got a really clear understanding of what the journey to love is, to lock in the sense that it's a romance. And you've got the whole thing on here. It's 34 pages long. So this is just an incredible template from which to write. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces again, or you can see mine. It's just an incredibly powerful process to get done, so that then the writer can go on to write that book, which is in fact what Jeannie did with Savannah's help. So just a huge shout out again to Savannah Gilbo and Jeannie Lee Rose for letting me share all of that material for you and letting you see what that is. It's a powerful, powerful tool and process, and it all depends on following those rules, getting those 3 pages right, putting the 10-point checklist to it, and really making sure those things are locked in before you go and start to write. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Q&A and try to answer some of the Q&A. And like I said before, I will go on to the Romance Week Facebook group and answer questions after this, or later today and throughout the week. So if I don't get to your question, please go on there and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. You'll also get the materials in the Romance Week hub. You'll get the slides that I just shared. You'll obviously get the recording of this. There's an inside outline how-to worksheet that kind of walks you through some of the beginning things. You'll get that 10-point checklist. There's an excerpt from the Blueprint for a Book in there as well, so you can get a sense of why we do the inside outline and where it fits in that 14-step process. So I see so many things happening in the chat, but I'm going to go into the Q&A to answer questions. So if you want me to answer them, please go in there. Okay, so somebody who is anonymous asks if an antagonist can have a backstory as the protagonist, and the answer is please, yes, 100%, 1000%. You should do an inside outline for your antagonist. It's a fantastic exercise to do, to see what the story looks like from their point of view, because people are not just evil. People are not just out to get others. People act in ways because they think it's the best way to act. And that's a really great way to have a 3D holistic character who is alive and feels real, is to do an inside outline for them. And in fact, you can do it for secondary characters and subplots as well. Foster's asking, are romance novels ever written from the perspective of a heterosexual man, or is the protagonist always a woman or gay man? The answer is absolutely. They're written in all ways, from all places, and in all different kinds of styles and all different combinations. You can absolutely do whatever you want. Amy says, do your characters ever stray from the inside outline? If so, what do you do when that happens? So Amy, here's the thing. People often think that when you do something like this, it's all solid and set in stone and you can't change it. And when you write, there's no more creativity, like you squeeze all the juice out of it. And it's just not true. The way that I think about it is doing an inside outline is like making a target and you're aiming for that target. And you might be changing and shifting things as you go, which is totally fine, but at least you're aiming for a target. And then as you write, you're going to hone in closer to that bullseye. So yeah, they might stray, the characters might stray. I mean, I have a client that I've been working with for 3 years. She's working on her second novel now. And she, in the middle of writing the second novel, we did the inside outline work, just like you saw Savannah doing with Jeannie. And she started writing, and halfway through the manuscript, she decided to blow the whole thing up and change the point of view. And it really, really blew the whole thing up. And we started over again. Sometimes that happens. Like, doing this work doesn't save you from the hard work of writing a novel. You still have to discern and change and tweak as you go. What I love about the inside outline, though, you can see in Jeannie's, when you blow it out to that larger 15-page version, you can go in there. Let's say you want to make a change and you find a character while you're writing, making something different is happening than what you had planned. You can go back to the inside outline. It's almost like an external hard drive for your story, and you can find the places, you can trace the thread. It's like a tapestry. That was two metaphors in one. It's a external hard drive and a tapestry. You can find the thread of that character and trace where that thread is and pull it tight and go in and change how it's woven. And you can do that on the inside outline. And then that's the placeholder. Then on your manuscript, you go in and you execute those fixes that the inside outline is holding. So it's an iterative process, writing a novel. And the inside outline is a tool that lets you be flexible while you're writing and while you're going. Paige is asking, is it okay to be a pantser and focus on the emotion and free flowing when getting that first draft, but then when editing, focusing more on the structure? Do I think that would work? Paige, I mean, I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm only just, one person with one opinion, and there's many people with others' opinions. And in this Romance Writers Week, you guys are going to be getting, there's so much great information. And my advice to you would be, find the tools and the people and the systems and the strategies that work most for you and dismiss the rest. Like, if it doesn't work for you, it's not for you. There's no one right way. But I would say my opinion on what you're suggesting is that you're going to waste a lot of time and cause a lot of frustration. And I know this not only because I have written that way myself, but I have coached people who've written that way, which I will no longer do, by the way. And I have developed entire coaching frameworks to help people not do this. So, like, I'm standing on the soapbox of don't do this, because it just doesn't work. You can't go back and put a structure in place. Structure is the form on which a novel rests. It just is. Structure is, you need to have a container to hold the story. If you don't have a container, all you have is just a bunch of stuff, a bunch of writing, a bunch of scenes. And maybe some of it is great. Maybe you develop a great character that way. Maybe you develop a cool scenario or plot in that way. And if you need to do that, if that's your process, you do that. But then I think you have to go back and build a structure and that's going to contain that story. So I've been doing this for a long time. And by this, I mean, what a book coach does is rescue writers from themselves. That's kind of what we do. We're here. Nobody comes to a book coach if they don't need help. If they don't need help, they're already doing the thing that they're doing, and they've figured out their process and they're doing it. But if they need help, they come to somebody who has the experience and the framework to help them. And so we have just seen mean, we have now 88 certified coaches at Author Accelerator. So we see a lot of manuscripts. We see a lot of things happen. And we have a community of coaches where we're always learning and growing and sharing with each other. And what you're talking about is a thing that literally breaks our hearts all the time, because it's like, why do people do this to themselves? Why do they write this entire manuscript and then they have to go back and do that foundational work or that logical underpinning work to build? It's like building a house without a foundation. So my strong opinion would be, if you can avoid writing a whole draft as a way in to avoid it. The inside outline, usually most of our coaches actually have programs to coach people through inside outlines, and they usually are somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 weeks. It's 4 to 6 weeks that could save you literally years. When I was working with KJ, and I do apologize, by the way, on that glitch in my slides. I also saw some other typos in my slides, like, you try so hard, but whatever. When KJ was working on her second novel, she had a deadline of a year, not a year, 6 months, half a year, that she wanted to get her second novel done in. And we spent 3 of those 6 months working on the inside outline. She knew she could write. She writes very fast. What she didn't want is to build a problem into her book that she would then have to unwind. So we spent 3 months on the inside outline, really nailing it down, really getting it right, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's just a process that I find works. You have to do that foundational work. Daryl is saying, is Stephen King misleading us when he says he's a complete pantser? I mean, here's the thing. Stephen King is a genius. And oftentimes these native genius writers shouldn't be the ones to teach us how to write. I mean, I happen to think Stephen King's writing books are amazing. So there's that. But he's a genius. He does a thing that most of us can't do. If you could do that, or I could do that, we would already be doing that. So he probably is. He probably has the ability to do both things at the same time and do them well at the same time and hold that all in his head at the same time. But most of us just don't. That's our problem, is we're not geniuses. I feel, Michelle, like I could keep answering questions forever, and I'm happy to, but I'm going to let you tell me that it's time to stop or not.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was amazing. The chat is just flooded with awesome praise for your session. Everyone loved it, and they just can't get enough. So we're so grateful for your time. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for popping into the Facebook group later. I'm sure you'll get a boatload of questions there as well. So everyone, thank you so much for being here. We do have another session coming up in just about 29 minutes from now. So we hope you join us then. And thank you, everyone, once again. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, please go over to the Facebook group and repost your questions, and I'll try to answer. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.